Baroda Museum is famous for its collection of European oil paintings in Asia. It is one of the biggest picture gallery in Asia, and it has collection of many rare paintings. My specialization is conservation of cultural property and works of art, and I worked for 11 years in Baroda Museum. Baroda Museum is famous for its collection of European oil paintings and photo-bronzes. Especially, for the conservation point of view, the high ceiling of Baroda Museum is beneficial for the objects because it controls the climate within the monsoon, summer and the winter. Conservation is a very important aspect of museology because without conservation, if you go on collecting the object, it has no meaning. There are several agencies in the atmosphere, in the environment, that day by day the objects are deteriorating because of natural as well as man-made agencies. Now, if you see that how climate is affecting the cultural property and what conservation is. Conservation is a very broad term which includes preservation and restoration. Preservation, in generally term we say that we are going to enhance the life of the object, that is preservation. Restoration means something is missing from the object and we are going to add some kind of material into the object having similar property, then it can be said that it is a restoration. But when you talk about conservation, conservation is the study of environment by which the deterioration takes place in museum objects, as well as it is a study of the property of the material. Different kind of materials have a different effect of environment. And the third thing is the preservation, how we can minimize the rate of deterioration in museum objects. That is the very important aspect, and nowadays it is said that it is a preventive conservation. How can we take preventive measures to control the action of environmental factors? So, if you say conservation, there are two kinds of conservation. One is curative conservation, another is preventive conservation. We give more emphasis on preventive conservation because in preventive conservation we are not going to do anything with the object. We are just going to handle the surrounding environment of the object. So we are not going to treat the object in any way. There will be no chemical action, chemical reaction on the object itself. While curative conservation is once the deterioration is set in, and then we have to take certain chemical treatment. We have to undergo chemical treatment to see that how we can bring the object back into its original position without disturbing its aesthetic value. So it would be better to prevent the object from deterioration so that we cannot disturb in any way the state of preservation of the object. Now, preventive conservation is nowadays more popular because through the preventive conservation we can enhance the life of the object, and we are trying to make the object safe within the showcase or within the storage. The thing is that the preventive conservation includes the cleaning the area of the object, cleaning inside the showcases, cleaning outside the showcases, within the galleries, within the stores, so that the dust and dirt can be avoided. Dust and dirt is a breeding place for biological agents like insects, fungal and other bacterial activity is initiated because of the presence of this thing. So it is better to take preventive conservation. Preventive conservation can also be taken care of by measuring temperature and relative humidity within the gallery, within the showcase, so that we come to know that what is the prevailing condition in the gallery. So if it is less or more, then we can control it. There are prescribed rate of temperature and humidity. So accordingly we can compare with a standard figure, and we can then modify it by taking certain actions, that how we can take the temperature and relative humidity up and down. So this is a very important aspect of preventive conservation. Now museum has to perform different functions. They are collection, documentation, preservation, research and education. Now conservation is important because the objects which you are going to show to the people, the visitors, it must be in a good aesthetic sense. Once they become fragile or deteriorated and looks ugly, that will not give a good impression on the visitors. And therefore, conservation is a very important aspect of a museum, very important function of the museum. And to fulfill this function, we need conservation lab in a museum, because conservation is a highly technical subject. Everyone cannot perform the function of conservation, or anybody cannot take the work of conservation. It requires some specialization. Conservation includes a lot of science. So a person who has a science background can work well so far as the conservation of antiquities and works of art is concerned. Now, conservation is not a new subject. It was coming from the primitive people, because the primitive people also used to preserve their materials. Like primitive people used to wear animal skin. They kill the animal and they use the skin of the animal to wear. Now, when they use animal skin directly, it cannot last for a long time. And therefore, day by day, they learned that if we put the animal skin on a roof of our house where we can cook our food, so that by burning of the wood, some fumes are created, and that goes up on the ceiling part, that is the roof. And because of the fumes of the wood, they get their skin tan. Of course, it is not a scientific tanning of a skin, but the skin tanned in this way, in this manner, can last for a longer time than the raw skin. So they learned the art of preservation, and they also implemented it. And slowly and gradually they started making development in that. But nowadays, we have scientific methods in tanning of skin, in other parts of the conservation methods. So, slowly and gradually, a science came into existence behind the conservation aspect. Now, the thing is that who will do conservation and how? What is the responsibility of conservator? What is the responsibility of a curator? That is a very important aspect, because every curators cannot undertake the work of conservation, because curator has different responsibilities, while conservator has to perform conservation. Now, conservation lab is established once in a museum with the sophisticated instruments, some chemicals, some equipments, some glasswares, and so many things required in a conservation lab. Once it is established, the conservation lab, the laboratory is able to take up a work of conservation. But the objects are displayed in a gallery or stored in a storage area. Who will see that the object needs chemical treatment or a conservation treatment? Because once the object is put inside the showcase or in the storage, a curator has to take a round and he has to observe the present status of the object. If curator cannot understand that what problem is going on with the object, he can take help of a conservator, and conservator can help him in diagnosing the problem. So, I mean to say that there must be a very good collaboration between the curatorial department and the conservation department. If there will be no collaboration, then the sufferer will be the collection, the objects. And therefore, curator and a conservator has to work together with a good collaboration, with a good understanding. Now, once the problem has appeared, either in a showcase or in a storage, then the conservator will advise curator that what action you have to take at a particular place where the problem started. Because if it is a biological problem, then you have to particularly treat that area to kill the fungus, to kill the insects, and to make the area infection free. So conservator will advise to remove the object from that place, and then you sterilize that area with suitable chemicals or suitable repellents. The curator will work according to the advice given by the conservator. Now the object is shifted to the laboratory. The conservator will study the problem. What problem has taken place? And the conservator will study the problem of deterioration. Conservator will study the material of the object. Conservator will study why this problem appeared, what was the temperature at that time, what was the relative humidity at that time over the place where the object was displayed or stored, and he will make record of all the possible causes of deterioration. And then if he found that the object is deteriorated, particularly this reason, he will try or he will advise curator to remove that cause for the health of the other objects. Now, conservator will make a case study report of the object. He will describe everything. He will make photo documentation. He will suggest that the object requires this kind of a treatment. And after the treatment, he will also suggest the preventive treatment, that if he feel that it requires a preservative coating, so he will make that. It can be done by application of such and such chemical on the object, and so that the life of the object can be enhanced. The conservator is trying to minimize the action of environment. So in that way, the object gets cured and get its life enhanced. So conservation is one of the functions of a museum, and the problem of deterioration in a museum can be tackled with the help of curator. Curator has to do many functions. The curator is appointed for the curatorial work, but one of his duties is to preserve the collection in a good manner, so that he can exhibit the objects with a proper aesthetic sense. Now, curator collection is in possession of a curator, and he is the custodian of collection. All the collection belongs to curator, in the charge of curator. The curator has to look after his collection, and he has to take care of that collection by various means. It is not that the objects put behind the glass or stored in the showcases in a storeroom is enough. He has to take periodical rounds in the gallery, in the storehouse, and observe what is happening with the objects. Any kind of activity, biological activity, or whatever is there, insect activity, fungal activity, if he will not observe, it will not come to the notice. If he will leave them unattended, major loss can happen in the object. And therefore, periodical inspection, periodical putting of repellents, periodical spray of insecticide, fungicide in the gallery, in the store, is a very essential function so far as the preservation of objects are concerned. And therefore, curator is a very, very important person so far as the museum is concerned. It is not that curator has to sit in the office and do the administration of the museum. More time he has to devote for the technical work. And therefore, a curator who has a love for art and culture can function well. Those who do not have love for their cultural property cannot take care of the objects. He can take help of conservator and other technical staff of the museum for a particular job. But curator has to initiate, he has to start up, he has to keep all the technical staff together for work. A work calendar must also be prepared, that what is to be done today. So that kind of approach is very important. The problem of deterioration can be avoided by regular inspection. And it is better to prevent than to cure. It is said that prevention is better than cure. In human being also, we are taking care of our health by taking certain medicines as a precautionary measures. So similarly, for museum objects also, some kind of actions are required, and that is what we are talking about, the preventive conservation. Now, curator and conservator both are working in a good collaboration, then I think so the problems of conservation will decrease. But there are problems with natural agencies. There are problems with man-made causes. Sometimes, some object is fallen down and broken. So they turn into pieces. Now what to do? Whose negligence? So it is curator who has to take care of it, that no damage should take place because of man, the staff. A proper technique of handling of museum object is essential. That is a part of preventive conservation. He has to teach the subordinate staff, the other technical staff, that when you are moving the object from one place to another place, how it should be handled. So that is one part, in case sometime, the object get damaged, because in Baroda Museum, when I was working there, I restored one sculpture known as Dwarpala. It is still displayed in an archaeological section of Baroda Museum, and it was broken into 5 pieces. Now the sculpture is so heavy that to bring it from the gallery to conservation lab is also difficult. But anyhow, we managed to, by using some kind of a trolleys and some kind of other mechanical factors we employed, and we brought it to the conservation lab, and we have seen that the parts, the parts of sculptures have been detached from the main structure of the sculpture. That sculpture of Dwarpal was broken from the different angle. The one is broken from this place, another piece is from here, another piece from here, another piece from here, this part. So, because of its weight, if you join it, it is not going to stay for a longer time. And therefore, it was necessary to dowel, to put a dowel. So, when doweling is done in the lower part of the body, in the center, then the upper part was drilled, and then it was inserted in the dowel fixed in the lower body, and then it was moved here and there, so that if the upper part gets settled properly, and according to that, the dowel was moved or bent some here and there, and then a proper adhesive was sprayed on both the part of the stone, and then it was get fixed. And then the other parts, like the head, is similarly done by putting another rod of stainless steel and in the lower part of the body, and then the head is fixed like that using the similar adhesive, and then the smaller parts are fixed, and there also the curvature is there, the doweling was done, again the rod of stainless steel was bended, and it was brought to the shape of the hand, and accordingly that part was fixed. And after that, the gap of the broken part was filled up by making a putty using suitable adhesive, and then it was touched with a similar color of the stone, so that it look nice and it will not come to the notice of the visitors that the statue was broken. But any expert is seeing, then he can make out that the sculpture is restored. Actually, it is a principle of the conservation that very exact work should not be done. It should be noticed that the restoration is done, and according to that ethics we have performed that function during that time. Similarly, another problem I noticed in Baroda Museum, with some sculptures, the visitors are touching that sculpture. Some objects in the Japanese gallery, previously they were kept open without showcase, so it was also touched by the visitors. And after a long time, if you see that portion becomes black, and somewhere, if I give example of one enamel vase, the enameling work, if it is broken from somewhere, the visitors are used to put their nail and getting more and more chips out. So the enamel vase get damaged because of that way, and it becomes a blackish in color. Its original part seemed different than what it was earlier. So that was also brought to the laboratory, and we have given a chemical treatment. With the help of certain chemicals, we have removed that all oil stains which are taken place because of the perspiration of the human beings, the oiliness on the hand, by touching it several times and getting dust over it. So that blackish part was removed by application of certain chemicals, and the original appearance came into view. But what about the lossy part of those plaques removed by the visitors? The metal directly became visible, and that was not possible to do again enameling work, and that was filled up with some kind of adhesive, and so that the visitors cannot remove more and more flags of that vase. So we stopped further deterioration of the vase, and by that way, the rest of the enameling work which is there on the enamel vase was remaining intact till now. So this kind of action is required. What is necessary? This is man-made damage caused to the objects. We speak in a museum. We say in a museum that it is human vandalism. Human vandalism is one of the major problems in monuments, in museums, and so many other places. In well section also I have seen that people used to touch the skeleton of the well. So it was also become very black at a particular portion where the visitors are used to touch. Another bad habit of the visitors are they always used to put their name on the object, so that people can say that so and so person visited this place. So it is also happening in monuments that you find so many names written on the surface of the object or surface of the monument. It is a very bad habit of visitors. They need to be educated that by doing this action you are damaging the cultural property, and for that you have to have a campaign for the education of the visitors, that how you can take part of preservation of cultural property, but not doing the vandalism. So this is also one of the important aspect a curator has to consider, or a museum authority should consider. Even the authority of monuments should also consider this aspect, because the monuments are damaged much with the human vandalism, and it is the best way to educate the people, educate the visitors in this direction, so that we can at least save our cultural property through human vandalism. There are several problems we have observed in the paintings. I came across one example of watercolor painting. Came from one private collectors with a problem of spreading of the pigments, paint on the painting, and the whole appearance of the painting get disturbed. So I said, how it has happened? Then he replied that, the painting was in the house, and the housemaid was cleaning, some dusting was done, and with a wet cloth he cleaned the painting. So the watercolor spread from one end to another end, and then he seen this picture that it is disturbed. Then she stopped doing that, and she told the owner that this had happened, and so the painting came to me for restoration work. But the painting has a problem that the color spread into all the figures of the painting. It was not possible to remove that particular paint from that one. You have to have do the in painting at certain major portion of the figures, and that was we try to avoid much more in painting work. But in this case, the owner wished that I want this painting get restored in the similar way in which it was. So it was done with a in-painting work, and the in-painting work was done at all the figures, and it was brought into its original condition. But what I mean to say that when you are keeping art pieces in your house, you must take care of those art pieces. It is not a negligence of the housemaid, but it was a negligence on the part of the owner. When you are saying to clean certain things to housemaid, you should inform her that you should not do cleaning like this, because these are this kind of paintings, these are susceptible to water or whatever is there. Because of the lack of the training to the housemaid, this incident has taken place. So the original artwork get disturbed, the additional work is to be done. This is not good part on the ethical value, on the ethics doesn't permit to do this kind of thing. But when it was in a museum, we cannot do this kind of work, but it was a private owner, so that work was accomplished by that way. The Baroda Museum is known for its collection of European oil paintings, and there is one post of picture restorer in a museum in Picture Gallery in Baroda. The paintings are invaluable, and now it requires some attention so far as its preservation is concerned. Because since long I can say that before, after 1995, there is no picture restorer. Picture restoration is a very highly specialized subject, and no other employee of the museum can undertake restoration work. In some of the paintings, it seems that the varnish became yellow. In some paintings, there are at some portion the blisters appear. In some paintings, it is seen that the dust deposition is there. So the cleaning of painting is required. The blistering of in a paint layer has to be again treated and get in a proper way the painting must be restored. There are cracks appeared in a paint layer because of the unsuitable climate. The climate control must be done so that the painting should not get damaged. So these kind of actions are required, but who can decide that there are problems? It is picture restorer and curator. The picture restorer is not there in a museum since 1995, and nobody is attending the problems of restoration of oil painting. It is a need of the hour to have a picture restorer in a museum and picture gallery Baroda for the life of the European oil paintings. One problem came to my mind to the sculptures displayed outside the museum building in Museum and Picture Gallery Baroda. It was known as a sculpture garden created by Mr. R.D. Parmar when he was director of the museum, and the sculptures are displayed in that particular area. It was a very good work he has done so far as the sculptures became open for public to see. Otherwise, they were lying somewhere in the stores and people cannot see those sculptures. But day by day, it has come to our notice that because of the rainy season, some kind of erosion is taking place in the stores. Moreover, it is also found that some kind of biological growth like algae and moss every year takes place, get dried in a summer season and then again reactivate, regenerate in a monsoon season. The growth of biological agents like algae and moss not only disintegrate the stone's material but also cause pitting on the surface of the stone, which accumulates the dirt from the environment and give them ugly look. So every year if you go on conserving them after monsoon, it becomes some part, some material from the sculpture itself is going to eradicate or erosion takes place. Instead of that, as a action of preventive conservation, we should take certain actions to stop the growth of biological material every year. So it was necessary to provide them a shade at a particular sculpture. The shade should be designed in such a way that it will not give an ugly look to the sculpture garden, but save the sculptures. In addition, we can also give coating to that particular stone sculptures of a particular chemical, so that even if some droplets of water fall over the sculpture, will get down and there will be no absorption of water in the sculpture itself. So, by that way we can stop the repeated growth of biological agents and can stop the biodegradation of those sculptures. As a conservation professional, I am giving more emphasis on the conservation aspect so far as museums are concerned. And there are, except Baroda Museum, I can say that there are several museums in Gujarat. In Gujarat, that more than 80 museums are there. Out of them, the 19 museums are government museums. All the 19 museums are having 2.5 lakhs of objects. Now you see 2.5 lakhs objects are taken care by the conservator, and there are only one conservator in a museum to look after all the museums, government museums in the state. I think so. It is not a healthy thing that one person can look after all 2.5 lakhs of objects in government museums. There were 5 posts of conservators in a museum, but because of retirement all have retired and only one person is there who has to look after the conservation aspect. That is not possible. It is not only government museums, the other museums, private museums, have also not a very good facility for conservation. Not in the state of Gujarat, but if you take an example of museums in India, the situation prevails similar. Even in National Museum of India, the present staff is not enough. If you see the past, there were several posts in the conservation lab of the National Museum in India. But nowadays, a few conservators are there and all have retired. There are one national level research laboratory that is known as NRLC Lucknow. The similar condition prevail there also. Most of the staff is retired and a few people are there who is working in NRLC. It is a research lab. Research is essential in conservation profession. If no research is being carried out, how conservators are going to be work? So all these factors are to be taken into consider, and it should be represented to the government authority to fill up all these posts in a near future, so that the conservation profession can grow and it can work well. Disaster management is one of the very important thing for museums also, because the government is initiating that there should be disaster management section in every institution. But it could not become possible for all museums or a department of museums, Gujarat state, to have a separate cell for disaster management. And whenever they face problem, the museum professionals who are working in a museum has to face against that problem. I remember one incident of 2006 when there was a heavy rain and the river Vishwamitri was flooded severely, and the flood water spread into the Fatehganj area and all area of Kamati Garden where the museum and picture gallery is located. The water started to come to the boundary of the Baroda museum, and it was about 4 or 5 feet level of water entered into the Kamati Garden, and the museum came into the danger that if water entered to Baroda museum, what will happen, because Baroda museum is having a basement. The curator, Mr. Vijay Patel, and the director S.N. Pandey was there during that time, and they came when the flood water entered into the Kamati Garden in 3-4 feet water. They came and reached to the museum, and they have studied the situation. Then they thought that if the water entered into this area, the museum will be having great loss. The water came up to the door of the museum, and then director and curator both thought that let us break the wall of the other side, and they took quick action and put several people there to break the wall of that side so that the water entered will go to other part of the museum. And they did it, and the water level started decreasing near the museum. So by that way, it was saved, otherwise the basement will be full of water. So a quick decision is required, and in this kind of situation a disaster management team is very, very required. But it is not there, and therefore whatever the museum staff is knowing and whatever they can do, they did it and saved the museum. It is really a worth decision, and for that they deserve. Security is also one of the important aspects of the museum, because the burglary can happen anytime in a museum. A simple theft can also happen. So 3-4 incidents have been taken place in Baroda Museum so far, and sometime the thieves cannot succeed, and sometimes some objects have stolen. The security of Baroda Museum is handled by police in the night and by their own guards during the daytime. Theft happened during the daytime, during the night in Baroda Museum, but somehow it could not become possible to bring the objects, stolen objects, back to the museum, even after the inquiry, CBI inquiry or the police inquiry. So what can be done in such situation? That there should be a lesson to be learned by the museum professionals, that the antiquities are rare, they cannot be replaced. Once it is gone, it is gone. So, each and every person working in a museum must have love for their antiquities and works of art. They should have love for their culture. And honesty is the best thing which the museum employee, museum professionals have to follow. If there is no honesty, museum has to suffer. And therefore, the higher authority of the museums must give these kind of lessons to the subordinate staff, that how they should work for a museum. This is not a institution of one person or one government, whatever. It is a nation's property. It should be maintained where the antiquities, works of art and culture is to be passed on for the posterity. The future generations should also take advantage of this. So they should believe this, they should generate the love among the museum professionals, and then they have to explain their duties and the method of working.